While promoting her groundbreaking role in HBO's smash hit Westworld, actress Evan Rachel Wood revealed a painful truth about her past. She'd been raped and physically abused by a former intimate partner while they were together. After years of speculation about the identity of her alleged perpetrator, Evan revealed that it was Brian Warner, famously known as controversial rocker Marilyn Manson. Evan was just 18 when they began dating. He was 37. Throughout their tumultuous relationship, Evan says she was tortured, threatened, and terrified for her life. She's testified to Congress and played a key role in changing California law. She championed the Phoenix Act, which extends the statute of limitations for domestic violence survivors. On this episode of Navigating Narcissism, Evan shares how she escaped her alleged abuser, the actress who encouraged her to open up for the first time, and how she's found healing. This podcast should not be used as a substitute for medical or mental health advice. Individuals are advised to seek independent medical advice, counseling, and/or therapy from a healthcare professional with respect to any medical condition, mental health issue, or health inquiry, including matters discussed on this podcast. This episode discusses abuse and suicide, which may be triggering to some people. The views and opinions expressed are solely those of the podcast author or individuals participating in the podcast and do not represent the opinions of Red Table Talk Productions, iHeartMedia, or their employees. Evan, I can't thank you enough for coming in and talking with me. Your perspective as a survivor is remarkable in and of itself, but you also use your platform to change laws. And that is such an important part of your story for us to learn from your journey of survivorship. To me, that's the focus of the story. So to that end, I want to hear from you, and you can start talking about what's happened to you anywhere you want to begin.
I almost want to start after the abuse and my experience with narcissism in the aftermath, because I remember going through a lot of that thinking, we don't talk about this enough. We don't talk about how this feels. You know, when you hear those things like, why didn't you say anything sooner? Or why didn't you respond this way? Or why didn't you do that? Or why didn't you do this? It just suddenly becomes so clear when you've sat in that space why you don't. It just took me so many years to feel like I was capable enough or strong enough or clear enough about what had happened to me to be able to face what I knew I was going to be up against. I started speaking about my sexual assault sort of right before the big internet Me Too hashtag movement happened. And around that time, my nervous system and my stress and the weight of it all became so intense that I started a seizure. I started having stress seizures. And when I realized just what a physical impact this was having on me, and it was making it nearly impossible to just move about my life normally and comfortably and safely, that was such a breaking point for me. That's when I just knew that I wasn't going to be able to stay quiet. I realized that my silence was keeping me really sick.
I always believe that we always should use names and terms that survivors are comfortable with. How do you refer to this person?
I refer to him as Brian. He is the one that created the name Marilyn Manson, and he was the one that told us all to call him Manson. But to me, that kind of feels like a cult leader asking you to call them Papa or Vanguards, like this title that he's giving himself to fit whatever image he has of himself. And I didn't want to give him that power anymore. And so I just use his real name, Brian.
Okay. So I want to go back to a couple of things you said, is that there's a way we think a survivor is supposed to respond. When you think of it that way, I think it would be useful for people to hear what a trope that thing is. What was in your mind sort of how one is supposed to respond when they're a survivor of sexual assault or any form of trauma?
There's this idea that something bad happens to you, you know it's bad, you immediately react and you immediately respond or defend yourself. Right. And it's just cut and dry, black and white. Mm-hmm. This is good, this is bad. And if something feels bad, then you should say something or something. But it just completely erases so much of the human experience and of the psychological manipulation and torment that you go through, especially when you're dealing with a narcissist and especially when it's an intimate partner. And there's so many other dynamics coming into play. I was faced with a lot of the narcissistic abuse I suffered. I was a teenager. I was so ill-equipped. My brain wasn't even really done forming.
It wasn't.
I was just speaking to somebody the other day, and they said, well, surely, when you're raped and you go to the police, something happens, and they come after the person, and I had to stop them and just say, whoa.
I'm not sure what happy
There's a million other steps, that come into play here before this happens. But people have this idea that people just come and take the bad guy away if somebody did something bad, and when I say things like the system is corrupt, that means, that means the laws, that means the courts, that means lawyers, that means law enforcement. A lot of times as a survivor, there's no easy way out.
If a person doesn't say something, Evan, especially in proximity to the thing that happened, the belief is, well, maybe it wasn't that bad because they're not. So if a bad thing happens, we would have said something right away, right? So that's a complete disregard of everything we know about trauma systems in the brain and in the body and how healing works. Then you add the historical context that most survivors of rape and sexual assault are not believed. And that not believing gets magnified under a whole host of circumstances. Were you drinking? Did you go there voluntarily? The race of the person making the report, the social class of the person making the report, all of those things undercut the likelihood that this will ever be taken seriously, which is a re-traumatization, which will put a person back even further. And so the entire system is conspired against anybody feeling that they could safely make a report. And so there was a process for you before you were able to come out and speak. And I think people need to understand it wasn't that something terrible happened on a Wednesday and by the following Wednesday or the day after you spoke up. Because when you first spoke out, you did not even name your perpetrator.
No,
you simply said this happened.
Mm-hmm.
So starting the story there that I finally spoke out. Yeah. Okay. So then what?
Or just like finally getting out and at first just wanting to, the first step was finally made it out. I convinced him that it was his idea to let me go because that's essentially what I felt like I had to do. I really had to study him for years and understand his gaslighting and manipulation. And I just knew that I was never going to get out if I was pulling away from him or if it was my choice to escape. I had to somehow play dead and give him something that was undesirable to make him feel like it was his idea to let me go.
How did you do that?
There was a moment when I felt like I'm so afraid of this person. I've been threatened so many times, either with, blackmail or with force. And if I stay here because I'm too scared to leave, I feel like I'm dead anyway. I don't feel like a human. I feel like a shell of a person. And so staying kind of felt like a death sentence.
Yeah.
Leaving also felt terrifying because something could happen to me or he could come after me and so I kind of felt like, well, either way, I feel dead, so I may as well try to escape. I'd rather die trying to get out. Then I remember realizing that a lot of what he fed off of was my fear that he was going to do something. Like that was the power that he had over me. I could embarrass you. I've got information on you. I've got photos of you. I've got you doing things that would humiliate you. When that finally clicked, I released any sense of trying to have any control over the situation and just kind of surrendered to what the situation was, which was just, look, if you stay, you're dead. If you leave, you're dead. So I didn't really fight back. I didn't really react or seem hurt. I kind of just went, I think they call it going gray rock.
Okay, so I want to break that down
Yeah.
though. Is gray rocking is that process where you render yourself to be a gray rock, as dull, as non-responsive,
Yes.
as unnoticeable.
As possible.
So when you're not responding either with fear or trying to appease them or trying to get into it with them or explain yourself, the goal is that they would get disinterested and move on to new supply. Gray rock's a tricky strategy because in many cases, what it can do is it leaves the narcissistic person unsupplied and they get more agitated. And their power over you is to get these strong, emotional, almost erratic reactions out of the person they're targeting. This is now psychological, right? They will get more frothed up. Okay, you think you're going to play this game? I am going to share those pictures with the world. Which they did. Which they do. And so what happens is if you can tolerate the menace and you can come around the other side of the bend, they will ultimately get bored. Because now it's just sort of they're exhausting themselves in the process of trying to break someone. They could just move on to new supply.
Yeah.
But a lot of people cannot weather that sort of gray rock agitation, as I call it. But in your case, you did gray rock. And how did that get you to the place, though, where it felt like his idea that this was no longer working?
Well, exactly what you just described. I wasn't trying to defend myself. I wasn't trying to talk him off the ledge. I wasn't doing all the things that I normally did. And one thing he was doing with me as well is that reactive abuse where he would sort of push me to the point of breakdown, where I'd either be having a panic attack, I'd be shaking, I'd be screaming. I'd want to reach out for help. And then he would tell people something else was happening. Like anybody like in his inner circles. One time he told somebody that I slit my wrist to get his attention or, that I cheated on him. Or like he just kept telling people all these things had happened that weren't happening to set me up. If I ever did reach out for help, if I ever did try to explain to people what was happening, they've already heard a completely different story. Like he's already gotten ahead of it. I made this mistake with a couple of narcissists in my life before I knew they were narcissists of if I could just show this person how much pain I'm in, they'll stop because I'm dying. I'm collapsed on the floor. I'm in a pool of tears. I'm pulling my hair out. I'm screaming. I'm cutting myself. I'm clearly in pain. And of course they'll stop. And they never do. They use it to their advantage even more.
Oh, absolutely. Well, but when there's no empathy, all the rules are out the window, right? See, that's the piece. What you described is I would show them my pain. I would fall to the ground in my pain in the expectation.
And not in a performative way, in a
like
genuine way. Like,
you're
this is how I'm
devastated.
feeling.
Yes, you're devastated.
Yeah.
What happens is that when a person goes through any form of narcissistic or psychopathic or antagonistic relationship where there's so much invalidation, there's so little empathy, you're not having that fall to the ground, panicked, distressed response the first time. This is after hundreds of times of being exposed to this, right? It's relentless. And so there's a point at which it's unendurable and that you think that within this person, I saw it for a minute at the beginning. I know it's there. When maybe they're not seeing how much pain I'm in, and they will see how much pain I'm in. Maybe they're not fully getting it. Maybe they just think this is an exchange. And when you go to this, it's really complete and utter exhaustion and breakdown. That's just game on for them.
Exactly. And that's what I learned through trial and error.
Yes. That, Evan, is the norm. I think that this is where it's so important you laid this dynamic out because that's every survivor's sort of mantle they wear. Maybe I'm not being clear. And if I was clear, they'd get it because that's the hope, that's the trauma bond. When you started gray rocking, did you experience the escalation I was talking about?
Yes.
That you did. So you were holding back and then the escalation.
Yes.
And what did that look like?
So at one point, he was threatening to go over to somebody's house that I knew. And I was scared, but I also knew him well enough at that point. First of all, he doesn't have a driver's license because he gets everybody to do everything for him. So I was like, well, first of all, you don't drive. You're not going to go anywhere. But I remember him getting dressed, saying he was going to go to this person's house, and it was very threatening. He was demanding the address, and I just didn't react. I just kept saying, okay, yeah, if that's what you want to do. And they ended up not doing anything and not going anywhere. And that was sort of the first kind of call their bluff
Yes.
thing.
Yes.
And then I wouldn't laugh at their jokes. Like, they were always incredibly inappropriate. And one of the ways they really tested the people around them and incriminated them in things was by, you know, there was sort of a code of conduct for how you needed to act. Rule number one was always just keep him happy and keep things de-escalated. And one way to do that was just laughing at the terrible jokes, joining in with things that were highly inappropriate. You feel like, yeah, I'm on your side. I'm trustworthy because I'm joining in with you. And so you're not going to come after me because I'm sort of being just as disgusting. And after a while, I was like, I can't do this anymore. And so I stopped. And I stopped performing in front of people, which was a big thing too.
What do you mean by performing in front of people?
So like people would come to the house, usually like a famous person or somebody that he needed to do a job. It was either status or servitude. The only way he would interact with people is if he was getting one of these two things out of the relationship. He didn't just have friends that he hung out with, that he connected with, that we just enjoy each other's company. There's an exchange here. I'm getting something from this. And so it was always a big deal when someone came to the house because it was almost like a show. It was like we had to put on a show for these people. And he liked having me around, I think, because I brought some status. I could wait on them, bring out drinks and do these things. And it made him seem very powerful. And if you did things wrong, you would hear about it when the people left. So everything would be fine when the people were there. You would act like we've got this great relationship. Sometimes he would say demeaning things or do something. And literally sometimes it would be so horrible that the guests would think he was kidding. Yeah. And they would lean over to me and they would say, he's kidding though, right? And I would just sort of have to shrug and look at them like, no, but I can't say anything because he's right there and I'm going to hear about it later.
It's what I call sort of the dinner party paradox of the narcissistic relationship, right? Oh, they're great. Like, you guys are great
I've
together.
seen you guys together. I've never seen anything like that.
And
people don't see it.
the door closes. And the other place this happens in a pronounced way is in cars. The event is done. You're in the car and the gloves come off and you can't get out of a car, right? Like, a car is the worst because if this thing's hurtling down the freeway at 70 miles an hour, there's no getting out. That moment is such a signature move in any narcissistic relationship, which means then as the evening's going on, there is this sense of dread that overwhelms you and completely clench when you're thinking, did I say that wrong?
You're walking on eggshells.
This is shards of glass.
Shards of glass.
At this point, eggshells left the room a long time ago, right? But you know what's coming because there's no way you would have hit every beat perfectly because you can't read someone else's mind.
No. Well, and they're looking for something too. I remember one time I got in trouble because I gave the guests water when they arrived, but I gave them to them in plastic bottles instead of glasses. And it turned into like being up all night, just getting berated and yelled at about how you either don't care or you're making them look bad or this is how things need to be when people show up and here's what needs to change and here's it just like it's the constant criticism, it doesn't matter what you do, they are going to find something. It's a game you cannot win. And they're just going to keep moving the goalposts and they're just going to keep upping the ante to keep you destabilized and apologizing and constantly trying to please them so that you're not looking at the horrible things that they're doing. And God forbid you ever try to like call them out or turn it around on them. I just knew not to do that.
Evan, you're talking about, you were translating into Grey Rock. How much of it at that point, though, was a frank trauma response? So what you're, you know
I
what
think
I'm
most
saying?
of it, yeah. It wasn't even necessarily a conscious thing. No.
That's what I'm hearing. It's not even the intentionality that Grey Rock can sometimes
I didn't know Grey Rock was a thing.
You didn't know what it was a thing, right? So what you were experiencing was dissociation and numbness. And when you're talking about the most severe levels of narcissistic abuse, that I would definitely was what your experience was. It is traumatic, right? You start getting into the territory of complex trauma, of severe relational trauma. And at that point, a person is now dissociated. They're numb. It's like the soul has left the body kind of thing. Actually, in a way, they've annexed you. You're done. Like it's a horrifying sense of disposability, as though they've emptied out the bottle.
That's exactly how it felt. It just felt like he's kind of pawing at me while I lay on the ground, like, oh, I think this one's done.
Yes.
And then I definitely noticed him getting bored with me. And then I got a part in a movie, and that's what got me out of the house. He still tried to call me a few times after that, but I got the nerve to hang up on him and change my number. And normally he would just keep calling and keep finding ways around that. But that last time, after I changed my number, he seemed to sort of fall back and move on to the next supply.
Okay. All right. So,
which I'm sure he already had in the chamber. You know,
there always is somebody in these relationships.
And with him, that was
in 2009. Brian told Spin magazine that the day after he and Evan broke up, he called her 158 times. He was quoted as saying, "I have fantasies every day about smashing her skull in with a sledgehammer," a comment his team later characterized as, quote, "obviously a theatrical rock star interview promoting a new record and not a factual account."
And it's always the same sort of pattern of, you know, the new supply comes in, he lets her know that the supply he currently has is crazy and is really hurting his spirit and doesn't understand him and is very controlling, and we have to hide our relationship because they're so erratic.
Yes.
So let's keep doing this in secrecy while I try to get the crazy one out. That was his MO.
I would say that must be on like page 32 of the Narcissism Relationship Manual,
exactly.
because it's now that person's gone, it is getting ahead of it. If you were to ever speak to this person, now you've been painted, not only have you been painted as though there's something wrong with you, it's an opportunity to sort of elevate the new partner who feels as though, well, I'm going to show you how sane I am. I'm going to show you how saviory, rescuey, great. How fortunate are you? Isn't it good that you got rid of that person?
I'm going to be so much better than that person. I understand you way more. Yeah.
You said something before, though, that did jump out to me. That the language you used was fascinating. You said you would get in trouble if you did something wrong. Bring the water in the wrong cup. First of all, in no healthy human relationship, child or adult, should anyone ever feel that they were going to get in trouble. A child shouldn't feel that they're going to get in trouble. They might feel like, I know mom told me not to do this. It could be a consequence or something. It was get in trouble, the gotcha. There's a gotcha feel to every narcissistic relationship. It's also infantilizing, Evan, that I am, I'm going to get in trouble. That's very much a child's statement, right? So these relationships are designed to leave a person feeling as disempowered as a child would in a relationship.
And it's knowing that something painful is coming.
Correct.
It's
correct.
Like, it's, that whatever's coming is really going to hurt.
It's really going to hurt.
Yeah.
And yes. And that's terrifying.
It is. Yeah.
While testifying in front of Congress, Evan explained the painful punishments she experienced, saying she was tied up by her hands and feet, beaten, and told by her abuser, quote, "I could kill you right now." Here's the thing I want to really talk about is you were only 19 when this relationship began. And
18 when it started,
18. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to use child, feels a little heavy-handed, though adolescent.
Yes.
And this beautiful brain of ours is kind of rocking and rolling to you're like somewhere between 25 and 30. A lot of innovating still happening. And this frontal lobe is it's the last part of the turkey to cook, which is why we see adolescents are, kind of sometimes all over the map.
Yeah, and impulsive and...
I don't mean this word to mean like dismissive. It's like, but to me, you were a child in many ways.
Absolutely.
And so the verbiage and the power and the control, you were 18 years old. What age were you when the relationship ended?
22.
Okay, so 4 years. And in that whole period of time, 18 to 22, I would argue this never got done.
I felt was still completely stunted.
Mm-hmm.
It's so much catching up to do afterwards. I felt like I fell so far behind on life skills and communication skills and relationship skills. And that was another thing that was really hard to navigate after getting out, was having to play catch up and feeling like my peers had passed me and not knowing how to function.
And there's grief around that.
Oh, so much grief. I mean... I grieved like the person I was so much, but the person I was before the abuse. And I hear this a lot with survivors of this kind of abuse. It was hard for me to watch films that I had done from before. It was hard for me to look at photographs. I think also because one of their goals was to make sure I felt terrible about myself.
Yeah.
And that I felt inadequate and broken. And they would tell me constantly, like, that I was broken and no one was ever going to love me after this. And